This may very well be the most comprehensive buy versus rent analysis you'll probably ever see. And let me start by saying this, I get it, and I understand why the opinion is so divided and why this topic makes so many people upset, as the average mortgage payment has doubled in the last 4 years, housing affordability is absolutely at its lowest in history, and the average income needed to buy the average home has never been higher. But on the flip side, how do you justify paying rent for 10 to 20 years with absolutely nothing to show for it? I had no idea how controversial this topic is and assumed that anyone favoring renting over buying was just lazy or drinking the Kool-Aid, purely based on the thought that ownership of something was obviously better than renting that exact same thing. And as a finance guy and somebody who was considering buying a home recently, I've watched pretty much all of the buy versus rent videos, and each one of them had an element or an aspect that another one didn't. And it felt a little one-sided as a person who was trying to make the best decision for their family, the biggest purchase of my life, and avoid being house poor all at the same time. So wherever you are now, this info will get you a little bit closer to where you want to be by showing you the real costs of buying a home, the real costs of renting, and where it hurts, but also where it makes sense. And at the end, I'll share with you my opinion and how much money you got to be bringing in to buy this sweet $1 million home. All right, let's get into it. I'm Slavic, and I've dabbled in real estate for about 10 years, but not how you think, because I'm not a real estate agent. I've primarily been buying and selling rentals as an investor, landlord, flipper. I did some general contracting work, and now I'm in finance, which is exactly what sparked my curiosity. So the average home in the US is in the ballpark of $400,000, and I wanted to keep this as close to real life and applicable to as many people as I could. So whatever reason, I ended up Googling what is the most average place in America, and I landed on Illinois, which is interesting, but we're not doing that, and we're actually gonna look in my backyard instead. I went between 350, 450, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, $400,000 home, could rent for, I don't know, about $2,500 per month. And when we isolate all the costs of buying a home, it generally always starts with the down payment. I'm gonna be using the most common down payment of 5%. Now that's $20,000, and let's throw in an extra $5,000, provided you got a real estate agent to help you with some of your negotiations. Out of pocket, you're already looking at $25,000, and then we get to the interest. Now this is gonna be your cost of borrowing that money, because in essence, somebody is lending you the funds to acquire this, and they want their pinch, poof, vanishes out of your pocket. So we're just gonna be using a 7 as an average, which brings us to the numbers. A $400,000 home after the down payment is a $380,000 loan, 7% interest, which brings us to a monthly payment of $2,528, right? But wait, there's more, because now you have to include the monthlies. And these are gonna be your monthly expenses, which wildly vary depending on where you live. You've got homeowners insurance, you've got property taxes, and don't even get me started on private mortgage insurance, which is a payment you owe to the lender as insurance in case you decide to stop paying your bills. Okay. And most of these expenses, like homeowners insurance and property taxes, generally continue even after you've paid off your house, and they get more expensive over time. And just when you think you're done, nope, now you own a home, and guess what? Everything in your house has a lifespan. And I don't know if you've noticed, but everything manufactured today generally breaks way before it did when we were kids. Let's throw in another $150 in there for maintenance. Now, it's important to mention here that all of these vary slightly per region, especially the maintenance. If you bought a home or built a newer home, which will require less maintenance over time. The general rule of thumb here is aim for a maintenance cost of approximately 1% of your purchase price. And of course, take that with a grain of salt. Principal and the interest is $2,528. Now, this number will never change until it does, and I'm gonna loop back to that in a minute. Property taxes are $553. These probably increase annually by about 2%. Your homeowner's insurance is $120, probably increasing year over year as well. Private mortgage insurance, which is about $150 if you put down less than 20% down payment. Maintenance repair costs, approximately $150 a month. And then there's the opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost is a big piece of this equation, and I'll tell you why it's really a hard cost for me to include here. Opportunity cost is defined as the potential benefits you miss out on by choosing one thing over another. And in this example, opportunity cost is what your money could get if you took that $20,000 and invested it in the market, like the S&P 500, which is averaging XYZ per year. And the idea here is that if you take that money and you invest it and you do it correctly and it outpaces inflation and appreciation, it could grow into a bigger pile of money, and eventually you could buy a home in cash or never have to worry about money ever again. Now, there is nothing wrong with that thought process, but there are factors in this equation that are working against you and they need to be calculated. The main word being could, because you could what if this and what if that your way through life and achieve absolutely nothing. So number one, the down payment we are using in this example is the smallest one out of any of the video breakdowns I've seen. I do this intentionally. Most of the comparisons on YouTube are using 20% down number, which is quite a bit larger than the 5% we're using here. Smaller down payment equals smaller opportunity costs. And number two, to be extra clear, if you aren't currently investing in this economy right now, chances are you won't ever invest in any economy, so you don't get to calculate opportunity cost to stack the argument in your favor. People view the equation with the opportunity cost to make their financial decisions, but aren't actually invested in any opportunity, and they end up missing both trains. So we're at a monthly cost of $3,481 per month on top of coming out of pocket $25,000. And to be even more realistic, after you purchase a home, you generally get 30 to 60 days of no mortgage payment, but you'll still be getting back your security deposit. Now, on the flip side, with the renting, you have a monthly cost of $2,500. And in most cases, renter's insurance on top of that, let's say $45, and a refundable security deposit, which you get back if you're a decent human being. And that's about it. You've got absolute freedom to come and go as you need between leases, and any problem that comes up, you just make a phone call or email a work order and poof, problem is gone. So you got option one, buy a home, which you pay $3,481 for a month, and it eats up $20,000 of capital, versus option two, you've got a comfortable, maintenance-free life paying $2,545. And when you fast forward year one and tally up the numbers, it costs $11,000 more to buy a home than to rent. And that's the equation that most people come to, and they stop there, which is exactly why so many people miss the boat, because none of these numbers are fixed. They all have variables that move and compound year over year, meaning you can't compare those numbers apples to apples. When you consider a decision to own or not own an asset, the numbers need to scale for your specific situation and region and length of time. And the time horizon here is one of the most important parts, because money likes speed and wealth likes time. People have been looking at their fixed costs now versus your total net gain or loss over that time span. And after I locked in the variables and moved that toggle from year one down to year 9, you would have spent $304,000 renting, or spend $380,000 if you bought it. And that's only one side of the equation. The math you want to do here is a little bit more complicated than that, because rent inflation is real and it goes up about 2.5% each year. If you follow this trajectory, by year 9, you're almost at the same cost as the monthly home payment if you bought, except with nothing to show for it. But it's even more complicated than that, because if you live in the house for a few years, you'd expect to start building equity, which means that less and less of that $3,481 payment goes towards interest, and more of it goes towards your principal, aka your future self, in terms of paying off the mortgage, kind of like an investment. This is an example of amortization, but you've also got appreciation, which is the increase in the value of the property over time. You've got closing costs now and closing costs to sell at that appreciated $550,000 value. You've got insurance and property taxes, which go up about 2% per year. You've got the rent inflation, which goes up 2.5% a year. You've got tax benefits, whether you're filing jointly or if you're single. And we should touch base on the standard deduction, which is the amount of money the IRS will not actually tax you on. It's important to understand that if you're single, you got a W-2 job, you're not self-employed, you have no house, you have no business, essentially you got no tax protection at all to write anything off, the IRS still gives you a participation trophy through a standard deduction, which means that you can write off X amount of money. In this example, I used married filing jointly because the single standard deduction just stacks the chips way more favorably towards owning, and I wanted this to be a very even playing field. And when you plug all these variables, your out-of-pocket difference for purchasing a home is $76,000. And you're probably thinking, hey, it kind of looks like it costs more money to own a home than to rent it. And the answer is yes. Just like your retirement, just like your money market brokerage accounts, just like your crypto accounts, if you're investing in your future, it takes money to make money. You have to put something in for it to grow, because the definition of investing is putting money, time, or effort into something with the hopes that it will generate a profit or advantage in the future. And as inflation pushes your rent to go higher over time, it also pushes the value of your asset higher. And this is where the equation starts to flip. Because instead of looking at that $76,000 difference as a loss, this is by definition an investment, because your net gain after 9 years is $100,000 more than a renter. According to this analysis, if you bought a home with these exact numbers, you'd be breaking even after 3 years of owning, and you'd get your money out of it after 5 years of owning, and every single year after that, your net worth compounds. And throughout this entire time, you never had to ask for permission to paint your kid's room to their favorite color. But I couldn't stop there. So I ran lots of different scenarios using the same calculator, changing all sorts of variables like increasing the interest rate to 8%, 8.5%, lowered rent by $500. I removed the down payment, for instance, if you had a VA loan. And in nearly every scenario I tested, you almost always came out with the higher net worth if you own a home. And this is where the psychological impact kicks in, because for some people, a home is the memories of chasing their children down the hallway with a soccer ball. And for others, it's the ability to build a rock climbing wall without asking your landlord for the permission to put holes in the wall. And some people don't even want to have children. So if the financial component is which option makes me the least poor, then the psychological component is a lot harder to calculate. Like making sure your decision makes you as happy as possible, because you may need to consider moving to a lower cost area. Maybe your career choices aren't as permanent as you'd hope. And turns out moving houses is one of the more stressful things a family goes through. One of the biggest aspects that I've left out of this equation, because it unproportionally favors owning, is this. The 7% rate economy is not sustainable long term. Higher interest rates are the only way the Fed can pull the e-brake on the economy and its spending. It's essentially the medicine that our nation is taking for a disease that correlates from too much free money over the last several years. And just like any medicine, it will eventually work. Maybe this year, maybe next year, but eventually you're gonna refinance and you're gonna be sitting at a loan balance that's lower, like 350. You'll be hovering in the 4 or 5% interest rate, and a good chance your home has appreciated and you no longer need that private mortgage insurance. And this scenario is much more likely to be your long-term financing. On the other hand, if rates don't go down, refinancing is a strategy. Capturing that appreciation and removing that private mortgage insurance is gonna free up a couple $100 and tip the scales more in your favor. And if you fall into the small group of people who do have the means to do a sizable down payment of 80, 100 or more as a down payment, well, you're well versed on investing in markets, then you should probably absolutely consider the opportunity cost. Just a reminder, as that pile of money grows and you reach into it to take some out, you will pay taxes. So make sure that it's in your equations as well. And if you're in this group, then you're probably wondering how much money it takes to buy that $1 million home. $20,000 a month is a pretty good place to start, assuming you have no other debts. I hope this video has answered some of your questions, helps shift some of your perspective, and I'll catch you on the next one.